Good evening, everyone. I think Mohan Rao sir is yet to join us, and as soon as he joins, we shall begin the session. Yeah, I guess we can start the session. It's already 6 and might take at least 1.5 hours. So,
Okay, good evening to one and all who has logged in here. Um, Today we are on the day 3, session 3 of This is Open Day version 5. And I'm glad we did have very good discussions on session 1 and session 2, which are up on the YouTube channel as well for everybody who have missed to catch up on. A warm welcome to all the people here and the panelists. We have Mohan Rao sir from Integrated Design Bangalore, who is joining us again today. He was on the panel yesterday as well. Welcome, sir. And we have Sunit Mohinder sir from Oracles Delhi. He was a part of the panel day 1, and he's joining us back today as the panel. Welcome to you too, sir. And we have again Rahul Paul taking over as moderator for the session. I do welcome our presenters for today, Chandi, Hiba, and Naima. I'm sure you will also bring in a lot of, or you'll also put across a platform for a lot of discussions to happen, like the last 2 days as well. And we are looking forward to it. Rahul, over to you.
Hi, thanks. So we'll quickly begin. Just a little bit of recap that of the structure of the presentations. We will have each of the presenters follow one another, and then we'll have the discussion with the panelist. And audience can put in their questions in the chat box. And like we've followed for the last couple of sessions also, the discussions or the thing will be the discussions or that will be all mostly around the discipline and not on the specificities of the project, just to encourage larger inquiries and the discussions around the subject and the discipline in itself. So today's theme is landscape interpretation, one of the classical themes of the discipline of landscape architecture. And today, through the reading of natural systems, we'll kind of look into seek new perceptions, look into radical departures in conceptualizing systems, as well as synthesize associations often overlooked. I would like to call upon Chandi Patel, Masters of Landscape Architecture from CEPT University. Her thesis is titled Shift in Landscape, Reinterpreting Wastelands as an Oasis, a Case in Gandhinagar City. The vision is to refill the voids lying due to the perception towards open spaces as wastelands, aiming to bring back values and strengthen linkages by holistic approach and make it more diverse. Chandni, over to you.
Yes, hello everyone, good evening. I'll be presenting.
Yes, do share your screen.
Can you see my screen? Is it
Uh,
visible?
yes.
And
A
is it
shift in
audible?
landscape.
Yes.
Yes,
Reinterpreting
yes.
wastelands as an oasis. Do wastelands exist? A shift in landscape. Reinterpreting wastelands as an oasis. Do wastelands exist? India is a land of paradoxes where a shift in landscape derives voids between people and landscape. Over the period, the bureaucratic data also started defining open spaces as wastelands, non productive lands, non profitable and degraded lands since British rule from 1858 to 1947 till date by the National Remote Sensing Agency to generate revenues, due to which the natural systems have become sparse and linkages are fading away. Hence, the idea of nature is disappearing along with the urbanization. The natural areas are getting engulfed by evolving cities, and people have lost the touch of nature. These past natural pockets act as an oasis, common lands, and shared natural resources that are threatened in peri-urban areas. Cities, people, landscape is not just for survival, but for shared identity, meaning, and dwelling. Hence, the vision is to refill voids lying due to perception of open spaces as wastelands, aiming to bring back values and strengthen linkages by holistic approach and also making it more diverse by acknowledging and integrating existing natural and hybrid systems. The extent of the area bounds the central Gujarat region, with Gandhinagar city in the north till Pariyaj Lake in the south, to the Khare River at the east till the Nal Sarovar in the west direction. Further, it focuses on village commons of Gandhinagar city. Within this extent, open spaces were identified which has been converted into other land uses and later left abandoned. Earlier characterized as salt affected lands, pasture lands, waterlogged areas, marshes, ravines, and scrubbed lands along streams are now drawn as wastelands. Why are these natural resources called wastelands? To conserve these ecotones, it needs to be seen through the lens of a living system rather than a resource. The system includes ravines, which are at higher elevation in the study area, holds high moisture condition, which are threatened by encroachment, scrublands, which stores carbon, are threatened by exploitation of wood. Further wetlands, that recharges aquifers are now threatened by groundwater withdrawals and landfilling. Also, the coastal areas are threatened by conversion into uplands. They have ecological, economical, and socio-cultural values attached to it, thus forming a large interlinked system. The natural systems are interlinked with a constant flow. If one gets affected, the impact can be seen in the whole system. The values of wetlands have increased due to tourism, whereas scrublands are highly degrading and under the constant pressure of urbanization. This flux of change in the hybrid system has increased the duration of recovery, fragmented the system, which eventually has degraded the system. Hence, the intent is to refill and reduce voids, changing perception, linking the fragments, and integrating changes. These shifts impact three major factors, which are ecology, economy, and culture. Hence, the sustainability of landscapes needs more than conservation and even restoration. It requires human creativity and the magic of art to provide meaningful and publicly valued landscapes. The interlinked systems are further traced and investigated at Gandhinagar city, where Gift City has impacted ravines majorly, which is a link between Sabarmati River at the west and the Khari River at the east. These linkages have disappeared from nearly the year 2003 till date. It draws out clues that this link must have been an active wildlife corridor
before urbanization because of the presence of Aranya Udyan, an open wooded forest near ravines. Further analyzing a transect to see how small a piece of land plays important role in larger system. The existing character of a transect is consisting of ravines, woodlands, scrublands, seasonal and perennial lakes, seasonal streams, croplands, brickins, and highways. Where rivers are dependent on riparian edges with rich vegetation and open wooded forest linked to ravines with scrub vegetation are linked to the village commons such as scrublands and lakes through stream channels. The scrublands are decreased by 40% while riparian corridors are degraded in a transect. Brickins and highways are also one of those threats to linkages. The proposed master plan of a transect is weaved through the proposed system modules to enrich the riparian corridors, scrublands, lakes, and links in between. Which will get strengthened by nodes, buffer, and movement corridors, modules to reduce evaporation by buffering lakes with native vegetation, which can retain moisture for a longer time, biospheres to filter stormwater, enriching riparian corridors will support biodiversity, movement corridors, growing and harvesting cattle fodder on peripheries of farmlands to reduce overgrazing pressure on scrublands, conserve and enhancing scrublands which provide major ecological service, grow of trees with deep root system to stabilize sandy soil. The demonstration link of village common is further analyzed and observed where scrublands and seasonal lakes are acting as landscape infrastructure. Between the year 2003 to 12, when the land was intact, the surface runoff was gradual. Whereas between the year 2012 to 2020, scrublands decreased, hence the surface runoff increased, due to which volume of the lake had to increase to store water. Here we can infer that one change can lead to another change. The linkage of the year 2020 are lost because of the streams converted into roads and scrublands into agricultural lands, due to which natural slope is lost. The larger strategies for demonstration link are to conserve and acknowledge existing conditions by interpreting and re-establishing linkages. Proposed key idea is to create a buffer in order to protect core areas of the lakes and scrublands, grove of trees to add a contrast and cultural significance. Also, it enhances the open scrub forest to explore. The perspective of a link is to make invisible systems visible, to acknowledge what is existing, also to bring permanence in space which was shifted, and to make the system function well. With urbanization, open access will provide recreational values and a sense of common lands. In these sections, scrublands are buffered to reduce air and noise pollution, with native vegetation having deep root system, fruiting and flowering plants which will increase biodiversity. While the biospheres to filter stormwater which will gradually recharge groundwater, grove of trees to stabilize sandy soil and enhance microclimate. The permeable pathways and buffering seasonal lakes with biosphere will add another layer of filtration and retain runoff which will provide water to vegetation, and also soil building at the edge of the lake will hold moisture longer. Overall, it improves microclimate in hot arid climate, reduces risk of flooding, and recharges groundwater as well as aquifers, increases recreational, cultural, and ecological values. It helps a ecosystem to function well, increase biodiversity, and also provide food security. Existing and native plants are used with deep root systems, drought and salinity tolerant plant which can hold water and can take waterlogged conditions. Also fruiting and flowering plants such as Salvadora, ficus, acacias, ziziphus, capparis, and many more. With an ending note, when landscape changes, perception changes. It is essential to bring sensitivity and perspective towards landscape. The commons or shared lands are those rare spaces that require equality in terms of status, rights, and opportunities. These lands have been shaped by people and they indeed give an identity as well as values in form of socio-cultural commons. The design provides a foundation that allows people to create and carry out commons as a shared ground with nature and culture. A sense of open spaces or access to lands, acknowledging and appreciating what is existing, will give them that opportunity to enhance the quality of living environment along with spreading more awareness. The Athenian philosopher Plato rightly stated that landscapes constitute my present, conferring upon it a unique character. Thus, the present is not marked off from a past that it has replaced or a future that will in turn replace it. It rather gathers the past and future into itself like refractions in a crystal ball.
Yeah. Thank you, Chandi, for this wonderful presentation, and
Thank you.
also to bringing about two aspects. One about looking at land as living systems and not and resources, and how how nomenclatures of land has for altered due to national interest and private benefits has kind of changed the way the natural and the social linkages of land have kind of altered.
Yes.
So taken on the same kind of a theme moving forward, next we have Naima Ali, Masters of Science, Architecture, Urbanism and Building Sciences, track Landscape Architecture, Delft University of Technology. The thesis topic is called Land Can Sometimes Be Water, Bridging the Dichotomy Between Land and Water Through Amphibious Landscapes. The project imagines a radical departure from the classic terrestrial centric approaches in landscape architecture to improve the quality of life in a seasonally flooded deltaic landscape that practices paddy farming below sea level. Over to you, Naima.
Hi, am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. I'm Naima, and I recently graduated with Masters in Landscape Architecture from Delft University of Technology. So I'm going to begin by looking into the definitions of land and water. The common idea of land is best expressed in Oxford Dictionary's definition: the surface of the earth that is not covered by water. And on the other hand, water, it is an area of water such as the sea, a lake, or a swimming pool. Now, these definitions hold true if you're looking at something like this, where this is clearly land and this is clearly water. But then how do you explain something like this? Is this land or is this water? How do you explain these in-between spaces like swamps, wetlands, and deltas? So today I'm here to talk about how to bridge this dichotomy between static versus dynamic, certain versus uncertain. Through my project, land can sometimes be water, bridging the dichotomy between land and water through amphibious landscapes. So the watershed context, this is the entire watershed, and the system talks about a deltaic formation in the southernmost district, state of India, Kerala. And four rivers drain into the backwaters, and from there they drain into the sea. And deltas all over the world are characterized by this interplay of land and water. But what makes this delta even more interesting is that here paddy farming is practiced below sea level. And it's not just extended to the physical context. If you look at their daily lives, like washing utensils, their daily activities, their livelihoods, or commuting from school and work, everything is between land and water. So in short, life in deltas is amphibious. But conventionally, these kind of amphibious spaces have been managed by imposing lines. So you can see in this illustration as given in the river space design as how they have imposed flood limits to the natural limit. So let's see how these lines are imposed in the context of Kuttanad. So these are the existing water structures, water lines. This is the paddy fields. These are the road systems. And now the dike lines, which separates the paddy fields from water. So this is how the dikes look. So clearly a hard edge structure of stone or concrete in some cases that demarcates the space for water and land. Now, what will happen if these lines fail? So these are the areas where flooding occurs for more than 10 days. And these are the areas where flooding occurs for more than 3 days. And this was an annually recurring episode. But in the year 2018, this entire area was underwater for more than 30 days, from 0.8 to 2 meters. And this was how the impact of that flooding looked like. And it severely hampered the quality of life in space. And that brings me to the research question, how to create flexible landscapes by redefining the relationship between land and water in order to improve the quality of life in space in the Kuttanad Deltaic region. So conventionally, these landscapes have been functioning with the help of these lines, but these lines are not existing lines of flow, but these lines are lines which we humans have imposed for our cultural functioning. But considering the fact that we have been living with these lines, it's not easy, or it's not something which we can think of to get rid of these lines completely, but we can reinvestigate the positioning and quality of these lines through new fluid geographical or amphibious approaches, in contrast to the classical terrestrial approaches. So Krause, in his work Towards an Amphibious Anthropology of Delta Life, had etched out 4 lenses to study life in deltas. Now, he comes from an anthropological background, and that's the theme of this paper. So the project Land Can Sometimes Be Water looked how these lenses could be applied to the discipline of landscape architecture when it comes to the context of deltas. So the research also looks about what kind of drawings can best represent these lenses and what decisions critical to design could be taken with the help of these lenses. So towards the flexible delta, the first lens is the lens of volatility. Now, volatility talks about how this delta was shaped over the years, so the critical changes, and what was the creative response of the people. So in the 19th century, this was water body, and later a massive reclamation happened between 1850 to 1945 so that they could practice paddy farming in these reclaimed polders. And the year 1975, in the interest of agriculture, they built this salt barrier to prevent salt intrusion, which happened like during the post-monsoon season, starting from December, so that the agriculture does not need to deal with salt. And over the years, what happened was there was this trend of decreasing paddy fields and seasonal flooding. So the lens volatility, if you project these changes to the future, the extreme case scenario would be a sea level rise of 1.5 meters and no room for livelihood in these landscapes. Now, after understanding the critical changes, I looked what was the relationship of water and man in this landscape. So before the construction of salt barrier and after the construction of salt barrier, so in the hydrosocial image, you can see that there are large numbers of men and women working here, and alongside paddy farming, there is also aquaculture, there is also a thriving duck rearing industry. And in the after image, you can see less of people. And here, while during monsoon, you could see the landscape still being used. Here during monsoon, this is just like an abandoned place for water. And I picked up two narratives, one from the before and one which talks about the system right now. So here it says that our land gave us everything. Water gave us fish and land gave us rice and coconuts. Our land never left us go hungry. We could catch fish from the rivers that flowed in front of our houses. This is our hereditary occupation. That's from the current scenario. I like my occupation and it will do it till I die. I am known by this occupation, which is my identity in this region, but this occupation must end with me. I will not let my children enter the fields. So from this narrative, it is clear that they are still attached to this occupation, to their landscapes, but they are sort of endangered by what would be the future of these landscapes. Will they be able to depend on their resources? So that is what I understood from the lens of hydrosociality, that is the value system. So if you look at the hydrosociality diagram from the traditional water system, as the content of salt increased when the content of water was less, you could see a gradation from agriculture to a combination of agriculture and aquaculture. And when the salt content was high, they practiced aquaculture. But in the existing system, after the construction of the salt barrier, this became a mono-functional agricultural landscape. So we don't need to romanticize exactly with the past traditional system, but in the future, the system could resonate with this kind of an ecological dynamic, and at the same time, have something like eco-culture, eco-tourism, and space for conservation as well. And having looked at this relationship between salt, water, and the cultural practice, I looked at the rhythm of this relationship. So this was a cyclical relationship of a cycle of water and a cycle of salt. And in the traditional system, the cultural practice also resonated with this cycle of salt and water. And that could be a principle that could be applied in the future, where we bring back this cycle of salt and water and how to make these landscapes valuable with this cycle. And that brings me to the last lens, which is wetness. So wetness talks about the materialization of water, and it comes from the understanding that the idea of confining land and water to these lines was just a cultural expression of how people perceived, understood, and managed their landscape. So from water, we can move towards wetness. And then to further understand the dynamic of water, I zoomed into one of the polders, and this was a conventional way of mapping water and land. And then on looking at a satellite image just after monsoon, you can see these patterns of wetness. So I modeled these patterns with the help of a sandbox experiment to see the dynamics of land and water with these patterns. But unfortunately, due to the pandemic situation, I would have ideally done this with the soil from the area, but I was not able to do that. But anyway, this experiment helped me further classify the different wetness gradients in this polder. So this area is like the driest area. And then there are these pools of water logging. And some of these pools, when consolidated, would form something like a water body just after monsoon. So this reveals the hidden terrain of this polder, and we can see this is like a microtopography, and usually this whole area is like perceived to be like one level, but now this small differences in the topography would show these different spatial qualities. And that was like the groundwork for this research. So then I looked into how these patterns occur. So it's by the processes of waterlogging and sedimenting. And then I looked how we could use these processes to create the new landscape. So you could have cut and fill processes, you could drain, you could do control flooding, or you could have vegetation along the sedimented areas or slowly reinforce them. And then the question is, who carries out these interventions or these strategies? So you could have humans doing it, you could have leaving them to nature, you could also have it as a combination of man and nature. And this was sort of like a list of strategies of how to construct this new landscape and how to maintain them as well. And that brings me to my research question, which translated into the design question based on these principles, that is how to transform seasonally flooded agricultural landscapes into amphibious landscapes that can resonate with the cyclical movement of salt and water. And then some further sub questions, which talks about how this new landscape can offer year-round livelihood opportunities, how can tourism be integrated with this, and how to bring this transformation gradually without disrupting the existing functioning, and what is the role of the inhabitants, nature, and landscape architect in bringing about this transformation. So the cycle of water, if you scale it to the watershed or to this region of low-lying areas, this could be seen as an amphibious zone, which is valuable even when it is land and water, and it could function within this duality. And the next dynamic is the cycle of salt. So I did a hypothetical mapping of how the salt would move in the absence of the salt barrier. And this sort of helped me arrive at a principle where you could demarcate these areas into zones with different degrees of salinity based on a temporal approach. And then I zoomed into the annually saline area. And if you analyze the water circuit in this area, between the city and this ecological hotspot, this area served just as a backdrop while you take a houseboat ride. And by translating the amphibious approach, this area could be sort of a gateway between the city and this ecological hotspot. And then I selected a polder which has two edges facing the backwaters to sort of translate these principles and see how the amphibious approach would look in a local experiential scale. And then the question was how to bring about this change gradually. So this would be done over a period of 20 to 30 years, gradually manipulating these wetness gradients to bring more space for water. So by the end of 20 to 30 years, the new space for water would be enough to compensate for the flooding episodes. But it's not just making space for water, it is giving meaning to the people as well. So then I looked at three different programs which the new amphibious polder could offer, that is tidal aquaculture, dynamic agriculture, and elevated agriculture. And I would just quickly go into how this new transformation would look like. So the tidal aquaculture is like transforming the edges, which are currently hard edges, parts of them, naturalizing them, so that you could harness the tidal potential here and create tidal farms. And at the same time, you could create fish sanctuaries or habitats for fishes, which would intensify and diversify the aquatic life, which in turn would create more opportunities for aquaculture here. Now, a quick zoom into the fish sanctuaries. This acts as a habitat for fishes and migratory birds. And this is constructed by the people just by locally available materials. And this is what a zoom in view of this fish sanctuary would look like. So another advantage of having this solution is that they would be home to species like black clams. Now these black clams, they ingest polluted water and they give out filtered water. So this is also a way to improve the ecological quality of water, and people then can manage or check the ecological quality by just checking these species. And the next is tidal farms. So along with creating opportunities for aquaculture, these tidal farms also create a corridor for people to spatially experience the backwaters from the edges. And a part of these boardwalks could go around these tidal farms so that they can see how these tidal farms function and also establish a spatial corridor with the backwaters. And if you zoom into the details within this boardwalks, they are also designed in such a way that they could harness this tidal potential. So in a high tide region, the aquatic species will stick to these structures or to the land here, and then they could be harnessed. So this really harnesses the intelligence of the ecosystem. And if you look at these species in their life cycle, during specific phases, they require salt water, and during the adult life, they require fresh water. So even the ecological species are suited to this cycle of salt and water. So this cycle of salt, which is a curse for farmers before, which is why they constructed the salt barrier, is actually a cycle of blessing for fishermen. And then I moved to the next program, which is the dynamic agriculture. So here, the wetness gradients, which are like sites for seasonal flooding, would be accentuated to create amphibious structures that could be like wetland gardens. And also, you could save the rest of the paddy fields from flooding in that case. And these wetlands, apart from giving a new room for biodiversity, they also increase the adaptive capacity of the polders. So then when life gives you a flood, you just don't have to take it as a problem. You can have fun with it. So it's more of like enjoying the flood. And that's the new approach that this project puts forward. And during the drier periods, these new structures creates an accessible path to the paddy fields, and you can get lost in the experience of the cultural identity that is the paddy fields, or get lost in the ecstasy of nature, which is like the future. So it's like bridging the past, the present, and the future. And here again, the salt, which will be reintroduced into the system, would check the abundance of some of these species, which could be invasive otherwise. But not everything is sugar, spice, and everything nice. So if you look at one of the critical problems which was there is the salinity intrusion. So we could look at an alternative scenario where you transform this area into aquacultural practices when the salinity intrusion happens, but also by taking cue from the traditional water system, they had this practice called orumutter, which is like a temporary salt barrier, which blocks the salt coming into these fields, and you can block it wherever you want to, because that is the structure of the polder. And this way, this landscape of conflict can become a landscape of consensus. And another critical thing for this dynamic agriculture is the regulation of water. So they have this indigenous system which would suck the water out and put it to regulate the water inside here. And this could be transformed into a multi-utility wonder by placing a flexible net over here, which could take in the fish, trap fishes into the system during high tide. And this is also an area where these indigenous infrastructure would be visible to the visitors, and also the rural life could be exhibited here. And I imagine these spaces to be an area to exhibit the rural life or for community living. And that brings me to the last program, which is the elevated agriculture. So these would be raised fields, and here fruit trees would be grown. In contrast to the paddy, open paddy fields, this creates another spatial experience. And again, these bridges add to the flexible value of the landscape. And with that, I come to the conclusion of this, that is the amphibious approach. So taking the design of this polder as a research method, I came up with 6 different amphibious typologies. And this, with the kind of maintenance strategies or the kind of wetness gradients, this could be translated to other polders as well. And then I critically evaluated these different qualities to understand what are their ecological values, what are their hydrological values, economic values, and so on. And the last point is about participatory urbanism. So these qualities are constructed and maintained by people. So they offer a way of connecting people back into the landscape, and also integrating the government, integrating the community, school, everything into this new landscape. And then this, how to maintain this landscape would be done using a calendar. And this is like sort of something which would be researched over the years to make it more user friendly. So at a regional scale, this calendar proposes that the salt in the system could be maintained by controlling the functioning of this salt barrier. So we could control which months this could be open and this could be closed. And based on that, the aquaculture, amphiculture, and agriculture would change every year. And if you scale this up down to the polder scale, the calendar would tell you about the different kinds of biodiversity and what would be the spatial qualities here based on what strategies you're using, whether it is like you're leaving it undisturbed, you want to flood it, or you want to drain it. And that sort of brings me to the final image for this project, that is, land can sometimes be water. And this was the design calendar that was developed, which talks about different decisions that can be taken at different levels, and also the different activities, the kind of vegetation and animals that is here based on the salt level. So this is like more fresh, and this is like salt, higher salt content. So in the end, this project, as Rahul said in the beginning, talks about how to do away with the terrestrial approach and think about a new fluid geographical approach that does not see land and water as constant objects, because land and water are continually changing objects, and what we see as land and water are just a tangible image of the situation. So the shift in paradigm that this project puts forward is that from landscape as an object, we move to landscape as a situation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Naima, for this wonderful dynamic, I must say, presentation, and where you just not look into that critical question of the interface of land and water, but also through that kind of question the working conditions or the working definitions of land and water. Thank you so much. Going forward, the last presentation for the session and for this year's ISOLA Thesis Open Day is Hiba Salim. She is a student from Landscape Architecture from School of Planning and Architecture, Bhopal. And her topic looks into restructuring of a central urban open space, temple and environs. And it's based on the Thekinakadu Maidan and its linkage in Thrissur, Kerala. The project looks at identification of a sustainable urban open space network by critical analysis and synthesis of major ecological and cultural aspects of the city. Over to you, Hiba.
Thank you, Rahul. Hello, everyone. Good evening. Is my screen visible?
Yes, please go ahead.
Rahul? Yes. Hi all, I am Hiba from SPA Bhopal. thesis topic I have chosen is restructuring of a central urban open space in Thrissur city. It is based on Thekinkad Maidan and its linkages. Urbanization has gravely affected the living environment within the city. Thrissur is a temple town renowned as the cultural capital of Kerala, envisioned for sustainable development by mastermind Raja Ramavarma during 1800s. Thrissur is one of the oldest planned city in radial pattern with a central open space, which is a hillock with a temple on its apex, sprawling over 65 acres. It is surrounded by highly dense built fabric, which is further surrounded by coal wetlands, which is one of the largest wetland system in Kerala. Thesis is intended to redevelop central urban open space and its linkages to enhance the social and ecological value of the city through landscape design. That is planned to achieve by studying existing open areas and its evolution and analyzing the ecological potential and understanding the cultural regime to develop a sustainable open space network and a comprehensive landscape development plan for the central core. I have chosen 1.5 kilometers around the Thekinkad Maidan for study, which includes the central hillock as well as the edges of coal wetland area, which giving high ecological and cultural potential to the city. Also, ability and proximity of major open spaces are considered while choosing the study area. Site is analyzed from evolution of the city to understand the geomorphology and development pattern of the area. City have 1,000-year-old temple in the center, palace complex in the north, commercial core in the south, and Brahmin and Christian settlements in west and east, respectively. Ruler has invited other communities to the city for development in trade and culture, which resulted in aggressive development followed by urbanization. Natural layer analysis is done in detail after this. Topography is analyzed by generating elevation map and slope analysis map using GIS, which shows that city has highest point at apex of hillock at 35 meters above MSL and gradually slopes down towards the wetland area, which lies around 1 to 5 meters above MSL, which allows natural drainage of the rainwater within the city. Vegetation analysis is done by mapping majorly 4 vegetation topologies: wetland areas, coconut plantation, native vegetation, and manicured gardens. Also, major habitat patches within the city is mapped to identify the ecologically potential areas. Hydrology of the city is analyzed by mapping the natural basin and drainage of the city and comparing it with existing manual drainage system of the city. City had excellent canal system and more than 40 ponds which acted as community areas during the olden times. Most of it is filled up and canals are broken with overgrown vegetation and waste dumping. Groundwater mapping and waterlogging map proves the consequences of the insensible developments in the city. After that, social layers, including the circulation activity study, mapping of heritage, and visual analysis is done. By mapping and documenting the linkages, major potential and issues are identified. These are the sectional views of the linkages leading to the central open space. All layers are combined to create synthesis map. Topography of the city with small hillocks surrounded by wetlands and naturally efficient system until the recent development. Was naturally an efficient system until the recent development. Insensitive developments along the wetland areas and by filling agricultural lands has interfered with the natural cycle, which causes frequent flooding in the city these days. Disregard for ecological value and further clearing of native vegetation has resulted in habitat fragmentation and climatic changes. Even though city has evolved into build-dominated tight fabric, there are several patches of coconut plantation and small open spaces within the area. By mapping natural drainage along with vegetation, I have identified potential green corridors within the study area, which can be developed. Also, detailed analysis of cultural aspect has helped to recognize cultural network within the city. CLDP shows the identified network within the city. Network is developed by mapping major urban open spaces and sustainable connection in between them. City infrastructure based on vehicular dominant road networks has degraded the sanctity of the temple town. A paved network with pedestrian walkways and green corridors can enhance the cultural identity as well as ecological value, as it can also help to reconnect fragmented vegetative patches. The project envisioned to develop a sustainable urban open space network by reconnecting major open areas inside the city with peripheral wetland area so as to augment the ecological and cultural value of the city. By establishing this connection, we can invite rich flora and AV fauna into the city, which can further enhance the microclimate and living environment. Also, it can enable urban people to appreciate and learn the significance of natural vegetation as well. Based on the study, I have come up with a set of guidelines and policies for developing the network. It includes type of pedestrian connectivities, green corridors, stipulation for further development inside the city core, pond renovations, vegetated buffers, open area recreational activities, and its zoning as well. Major issues addressed to network are flooding during the monsoon, enhancement of microclimate, habitat development, and socio-cultural life within the city. Central open space is selected to proceed with a detailed design based on a set of parameters like its ecological and cultural significance in the city. Central Maidan has been subjected to unplanned further developments which led to chaos. Currently, area is used for all activities including commercial expos to well-known festival called Puram. Sanctity of thousand-year-old temple has been compromised a lot due to high-degree human activities. Also, the space turned into a dead area during the regular days, leaving it as highly inefficient urban open space. Major challenge of the project is to turn Maidan into vibrant outdoor activity area without compromising on the historical heritage. This is the sectional view of the hillock. Detailed analysis. Central open space is one of the major node within the entire network. Design program is developed by considering the whole picture. Program includes conservation of topography, reconnecting urban crowd with water, ecological enhancement, green corridors, decentralization, and coexistence. Strategies are weaved according to the program to develop the design. Core concept behind the design proposal is to develop sustainable urban open space by connecting existing ecological cultural elements of the city. To do so, I have identified majorly 4 zones within the intervention area based on its interdependence between ecology and culture. Urban forest or sacred grove area is defined and closed area with high ecological value where the humans are just viewers at the most. Then there is spiritual zone, including the temple in the buffer. Temple is the buffer around, which will have ecology as dominant factor and human as silent participant. Recreational zone where ecology and culture complements each other. Then 4th zone is green corridor where human activity is dominated yet supported by ecology. Proposal strongly suggests to make Swaraj Round and the roads within the periphery of 100 to 200 meter to converted to pedestrian oriented with cycle and electrical buggy facility. This change can enhance the heritage value of temple and other historically significant buildings in the city core as well. It helps to rejuvenate the environmental quality by reducing the vehicular pollution and spatial congestion. This could also help to convert Swaraj Round into a healthy public realm, which can urge walking culture within the city and also boost sustainable social growth. Basic zoning is done in concentric pattern with temple and buffer as spiritual zone, which is surrounded by passive recreational areas, which further shift to public realm along the Swaraj Round. Detailed zoning is shown here. Also, the sections explain the variation in human interference and vegetation as we move towards the public realm. This is the master plan. Cycle and buggy tracks are provided from the northern and southern transportation hubs connecting to Swaraj Round. Buggy and cycle stands are provided within every 100 to 200 meter. All the major entrances to the site meets the formal walkway or non-physical boundary of the temple complex. Recreational activities and informal seatings are provided along the periphery, abetting the public realm. The space has been carved out for students, pilgrims, families, youngsters, and groups as well. Planting strategy explained through sections. The canopy density and character of the vegetation is varying in these zones according to their function. These are the sectional views. What I have understood after studying the area and analyzing it is that city was planned based on brilliant master plan without breaking but enhancing the natural cycle and efficiently using the resources. But insensitive development has damaged the ecological system, fragmented habitat, and is currently experiencing the consequence like flood and climatic crisis. But city is not completely urbanized now, and urban people are realizing the significance of ecology and cultural heritage, which makes it the best time to bring a change in the city. And I believe this could be the first step towards it. Thank you.
Thank you, Hiba, and also for putting into consideration the idea of cultural identity associated with landscapes. If I may now request the panelists to switch on their videos as well as the participants, we can then start with the panel discussion. Okay, so to start with first impression, we'll start with Mohan, if you can.
Yeah. Hi, and thanks for the event and the excellent presentations. All three come from very different perspectives of understanding whether they were commons or the interfaces, and I must congratulate all three of you. Very quick reactions. This is really not like a jury, as you're all aware. This is only reactions that brings in together many of the thoughts and ideas that have come in today, as well as to carry forward some of the conversations we have had over the past 2 days. So there is this deep concern for what are now increasingly called commons, social, cultural, ecological commons. And there were, all the three were in their own way quite diverse in identifying the concerns. I'm not so much talking about the design approach and things, but to really identify the concern that framed these things. So from Chandi Patel's understanding of open access areas, not so much from the idea of recreation alone, but to really understand the nature of the socio-cultural spaces that these engender. I think that's actually quite an important thing, where you differentiate the idea of a resource being not just an economic resource, but something that's much more than that. And Naima's presentation brought forth several provocations, all interesting, right from the idea of looking at the volatility, wetness, the flexibility, and the changing nature of these things. So it's not only about looking at the land and water interface, but who draws the line where, who defines land as land and water as water? Is that a never changing thing? If they do change, is that to be seen as a loss or simply part of a dynamic process? And these, of course, bring in many different ideas in terms of the kinds of intervention. Do we let the volatility continue? Do we actually be part of the metabolism that is happening on the ground? Do we fight that? Do we control it? How best do we consume this landscape in many different ways? And Hiba's was, of course, very different in the sense of the preceding two presentations, where it's a much more deeply rooted cultural landscape. So the idea of the commons here is, while many of the interventions do look at ecological concerns and things, but the larger idea of what created this landscape, how humans occupied it in the first place, how do we continue to occupy this while being, while recognizing the larger ideas of cultural sacred landscapes with their own inherent value-based systems. So I think it raises all three of them. More than looking at solution, for me, actually raises many more very valid provocations in terms of how does one enter or intervene in a piece of land, and what are the various parameters and paradigms that one will need to address. Thank you.
Sunit, if you would like to continue from there. I think you're muted.
Yeah, thank you. These were indeed really enriching presentations where, as Mohan just said, that the concerns were more than apparent. They were really very valid concerns, and were also brought forward in a very methodical way. So it's really encouraging how one is expanding one's idea about one's role as a landscape architect, and that is something that is extremely important now as we go forward. So I was just thinking that we're talking about reinterpreting landscape, and this word reinterpretation is something which is about assigning a value in a particular situation to a particular in a particular situation and to a particular situation, both from the lens of time and from the lens of space. So this is something which is happening dynamically. Now the issue is that environment itself, all the ecological lines of force, these are always evolving. These naturally are a repository of so many processes, because of which these are inherently things which are dynamic. Culture at the same time is also evolving continuously. The question that comes here is that while the nature keeps changing itself and the culture keeps evolving in response to that nature, and this dynamic between the two over a large period of time in our own country has found a very natural expression. There hasn't been any obstruction. There hasn't been any force which has disturbed that that relationship, and neither has there been a paucity of understanding the relationship between the two. Now, therefore, where comes this wedge? Where does this disturbance start? And I feel it is somewhere where this natural relationship between the two goes through the lens of planning, where we say that, let's say as an example, the rural environment becoming an urban an urban setting, which traditionally from an evolution model takes on a planning model. And this is where the interruption of some of this flexibility is being seen with a very, very, in a very blatant form. So human beings inherently have the ability to flex. They're extremely resilient. They're extremely adapting. So is nature. So where comes this rigidity is the primary question. And all the three presentations talked about the process that has led us to the present situation. It is now needed, the need of the hour is that as academia, we are able to go forward from here. And we are able to really focus on how systems and planning approaches and the role of a landscape architect therein could decisively transform this, could decisively, because see, it has been over, it's always a process. It's been around the last 10 years when one has seen such a shift, which I was saying in the first day of the session also, that one is seeing a shift from a traditional design approach of probably gated or contained complexes into this larger role in the city or in the region. So over the past 10 years or so, we've been studying these phenomena. Now, I guess we are sitting at this precipice, where this edge, where this study has to convert itself into some kind of an action. So how do you think this next step could be achieved? I would like to ask some of the presenters, in fact, to say how do you think this next step would really come about?
Yeah, you can take it up from there, Chadni. I think.
Yeah. So I think somewhere we need to get into touch with the planning systems or planning process. As a landscape architect, we are doing our job to understand all the systems, but somewhere it is not going, it is not connecting with the planning and politics that we all know. So it's always a question, even I'm asking, that why all these planning processes are not considering landscape as diverse landscape layers as a base layer to make any development schemes or like that.
Okay. Naima, would you like to continue on that?
Yeah. So I think this question of like nature and culture and the dichotomy between that, if you go back to like the first Earth Day, that was like theme of Elizabeth Mayer's article, Post Earth Day Conundrum. And we have always been in this area where we are talking about how to like bridge the dichotomy between both of them. And that's a very good question on how do we actually do it. So one way I see it is that when we propose a design, let's say, we should also keep in mind the aspect of maintenance. So who is going to carry these interventions? And once carried out over the time, like over a time period, how do they maintain this landscape? So that's something which the people who are carrying forward or authorities who are in charge of, let's say, who has the administrative power over the project has to like think about. So maintenance is something which I always think as a role of a landscape architect, we should think about that as well. So yeah.
Yeah.
What I think is that the next step should be that we should make people aware of the natural cycle, because however we plan, whatever we plan, people living in the city has to be aware of the importance. Like I said, in my city, the city was planned with a brilliant master plan. City had amazing canal systems, amazing radial pattern, and they had so many ponds also as community areas. But what happened eventually is that development happened and they have filled up all the ponds, which actually acted as drainage points. Right now what happens in this area is that this area gets flooded, because earlier they had two big ponds there where the rainwater get drained off to, and it recharges the groundwater. but we were not aware of any of these points, and simply we filled up everything, and eventually we are experiencing the flood, and we are not we are most of us are clueless, and until I studied this, I also didn't know any of this. So I think more than everything, people should be aware of how there is a natural cycle, and we as humans is just a part of it, and everybody should be aware of it from childhood itself. In our school system itself, we should incorporate it. And I think otherwise, we as planners or designers, we build something, we'll plan amazingly, and they will eventually bring waste and dump it, and entire system is broken. So I think this has become an existential crisis actually. Right now is the time to aware everybody. Yes.
Are any of the three of you in your kickstarting your professional careers now, taking this forward, or was it to be closed at the academic level?
Actually, I would like to discuss it with the town planner. When I was doing the study, he was pretty much interested in it. So I would like to take it forward. And in my city, they are actually doing some development works, but they are not looking at it in a holistic level. So I would like to bring this into their attention. And it would be very great if they take it into consideration.
Yeah, I had also, because I had this difficulty of like staying in another country. So then when I had come for my site visit, I made sure that I met with like the different heads of governance structures there. So like the irrigation department or the water planning and the local people and NGOs working along this theme there. So I would definitely get back to them with the presentation and with the research findings. And even when I started the research and connected with them, I saw this more of a research which opens a new dimension of thinking or looking, like new kind of solutions that they could think of. Like currently the town planning department or the planning people concerned, they have a traditional approach of looking at things. So this research could open doors to them to look at it in another way. And adding to what Hiba had said, I think in my presentation, I was talking about a lens. I didn't mention that in my presentation, which I critically looking back think is something which should be part of our literacy, which is hydrosociality. So it talks about the mutualistic relationship between man and water. And if you see water as a component of nature, so it talks about the relationship between humans and nature. And I imagine in the future, this lens would be something that we in the profession use, and how we think about like plan and section, it's part of our literacy. And when we look at a project, we immediately think, okay, what is the hydrosocial relation, or what is that relation? And that's something which my project would put forward, like through to other projects, like think in these terms. So yeah.
So my project, what I have done is very much related to my city as well, where I'm living in Surat. So it's a coastal plain. So there, the coastal areas, the lowline areas are going to convert into uplands. And all these, because of their perception towards these lands as wastelands, are actually going to become a disaster for future. So I definitely would like to take my thesis ahead to improve something in my city, and especially to save some landscapes.
Mohan, you had something to add to this.
Yeah, I'm just going back to the original provocation that was raised, and which is essentially that there is this deep-rooted understanding of nature and culture, both of which are dynamic, and they have coexisted very happily over millennia. And the issues that are being talked about, for example, conventional planning and what is the problem and where is the interface needed, I think unwittingly Hiba gave this very nice, I think it solved all the problems to me, at least, when she said, all this was working, the canals were working, the sacred landscape worked in a certain way. And then she said, development happened. Okay, so there is this development happened is this UFO that lands on our land, on our cities, in our lives. Because basically this is this universal norm that is thrown at, it does not matter what landscape, what culture, what population, what geography you occupy. There is this particular norm that is crashing onto this space, essentially trying to create this very universal norm to homogenize all cities as smart cities, every city to have right of way of so much and walkability and so much of open space per capita, whatever. I mean, we can use them as numbers, we can use them as patterns, but everybody is struggling with how do I fit my city into this beautiful imaginary city of the future. And unless we actually try and question the notion of development, because development is equated to progress, which is in turn equated to building, which is in turn related to imposed increasing orders of magnitude, of control, of everything. And unless there is a built-in flexibility is still too juvenile a word to use in a complex situation like this. Something that actually engenders this notion of growth and change as part of the norm rather than a fixed entity that one is looking at. And I think it will be very, very fruitful if one were to reflect on the idea of development, not just economic or spatial, but in all its dimension, all the dimensions that all the speakers have talked about: social, cultural, ecological, political, and so on. And that is the framework that should actually help us take the conversation forward.
So just picking on that, with the idea of development and the idea of looking towards what is the future, and there is always a vision towards the future, which we are so succumbed to or kind of lured towards. There is also this that has changed dramatically, is that there is a sort of a formalization of landscape that has happened over a period of time. Now, this formalization of landscape has happened either through the requirement, for example, changes in the type you change land uses. For example, you change a forest to something else or a commons to a wasteland, whether drawing the strict line between land and water that Naima had shown, or also, in the very spatial way, looking into how what is an open space, that you start to give a definition to an open space, a program to an open space, and thereby you actually formalize the habited space that a landscape kind of occupies. So how in this formalization process what are the opportunities, or what are the kind of processes to look at informalizing this system going forward?
Yeah, I mean, this is a very important idea to understand, which is the whole idea of formalization, as you rightly put it, is essentially working towards this imagined ideal. But imagined ideal could be a very small space like a house, to the street, to the open space, to the larger city structure. But there is this imagined ideal where it exists, I cannot say, but we all want to be on that bus. And very closely tied to this ideal is the aspect of aspiration. So it's no longer enough for us to get our feet wet, if I can call it, between land and water. I need to know very surely when I'm going to be dry and when I'm going to be wet. And does that meet the global norm of a happy life? So, I mean, there are many, many questions. One can, of course, dwell in it philosophically, and that is not going to get us anywhere. But what is really important, at least as spatial professionals, architects, planners, landscape architects, environmental designers, and things, is for us to question this norm that we are working towards, rather than exploring an idea or trying to look at all the potentials possible. You're actually taking that and, like you rightly said, formalizing it to fit into a different idea. I think to be open to that questioning is the most important.
Sunit, would you like to take that forward?
Yeah, in fact, the roots of this question. So when we do these academic exercises, there is a process that we follow. And very rightly, when Naima was giving her presentation, after a certain length of her journey, her foray into the phenomena, she came up with something called the research question. Now, this research question is the basis on which this formalization or uniformalization can be broken. So let us say that we are in any planning situation, any process, any project, any thing which is to be deliberated and brought about to reality. The think tank there has to start with the research question to understand that, is it that there is a development goal based on which I have to take action? Or is it this situation which is telling me that these can be the development goals, and this is how conserving something and developing something may not essentially be at loggerheads to each other? So this research question has to be brought into the parlance of real planning. I would turn this again back to where I started, that it's all fine, but then where is this platform? Where do we ask this research question? Who does it? How does it happen? So the problem is that here is a professional. So all of us are professionals. And we have a basic question. And most of us, I mean, I would not say it for everybody, but most of us have this basic question of sustenance as a profession. All right. So how do we work? There is somebody who hires us for something. We are paid to offer our services, and that is how our bread and butter comes in. Right? The government's dynamics of the way projectization happens and the way translation of projects or let's say hiring of agencies happens is based on a certain model where none of us alone can even think of making an inroad into, simply because we do not have the figures that can satisfy the figures related to the GDP, I suppose, which say that this is your, because you are in this kind of a GDP. So let's say your turnover should be this to be able to get into a project like this. And that can never happen, or that seldom happens. Then comes the fact, therefore, that where do we make these inroads? Let's say out of 100 people, maybe 0.5% may get into a government system and take up a job with a development agency, and then probably try and filter in some of this agenda under, of course, the political pressures. Again, I said being alone. Right? Here, I feel that the next step is two-pronged. One is ISOLA as an NGO and its role. Second is the academic institution and its outreach. Let us say that as an academic institution, we had this idea and this room to think so loudly about these situations, our cities. What if this master's program instead of being 2 years, now I'm going to touch a very touchy topic, could be made to be 2 plus 1 year, wherein this 1 year you had to place yourself in a simulated situation which you talked about, or you were into the research cell of the institution itself, which has the collective power to create this awareness that one is talking about, and to go and move certain dynamics and circles. And this is where also the NGO comes in. So this is where organizations like ISOLA, who can take the banner and at least create the awareness. Until this bridge, this next step is taken, the activism and the finance, these two issues. Where does the activism, how do we manage activism within the constraints of our sustenance? And if we are able to do that, then where does this finance come from? So it is this positive correlation between the institution and the platform of an NGO, which has the power to create some of these issues into real situations. I think until we accept that power of academia and collective working as professionals, this would just remain a, a kind of this would just remain in discussion rooms like this, and it's been, I think, too much now. So what do you have to say? I think that's the way to go forward. That's what at least I feel.
Okay, I'll on the difficult thought of marriage between ISOLA and academic institutions. For the moment, I'll just take a question for the participants that has been asked by Sonal. But she asked to each one of y'all, out of all the issues your city is facing now, which issue you think is the critical one? And as a landscape architect, what strategy you will adopt to tackle it? Sounds like a thesis question, but if you can quickly kind of give your thoughts on it. Anybody? Naima, you want to go ahead?
Yeah. I think definitely if you talk from Kutanad's point of view, even people there know the problem is water, and the problem is this seasonal flooding. So that is the most evident problem for that area, and how the livelihoods can sustain with this seasonal water level rise, let's say. So that's a dynamic that the environment is imposing on them, and no matter what they do, like solutions, whatever they've been adopting is very short term, let's say, and after a few years, the environment just hits back. So the solution that I would propose to the people there is to sort of create this value system and make them understand that flooding or water should no longer be seen as a problem, let's say. That was the groundwork of my research. And probably if I'm taking it back to them, these wonderful images, which is a way of buying their trust, is to show them that, see, if you do this, even when it is underwater, it is valuable. And you can still live in between land and water, and that still has meaning to you, to your livelihoods. And there is this whole value system which says that high tech or the new modern technology is what is what you should aspire for. So maybe show them that maybe the traditional way projected to the contemporary scenario could also show something more valuable. And yeah, that's what I would do.
Okay. Hiba or Chandi, anyone would like to continue on that?
Yes, so as Surat is the fastest growing city, and currently the migrants are increasing highly, and also major problem is that that all these natural pockets are actually vanishing very rapidly. And in that case, I would like to talk to the local people that those lands are going to taken up. So the small villages and all. So for them, it is like, okay, we are going to be in the city now, but they are, and also they all are forgetting that if this will be lost, then there will be no environment for living. So in that case, definitely I would like to similarly go with the way I have done thesis. So similarly, I would like to go ahead and to talk with even the government and also the local people to spread awareness.
So Chandni, are you giving a year of your life to this?
But I don't know yet, but definitely I would like to work towards it.
How would you is the question. Like to is something, but how would you? That is what I think should be a part of this answer.
Yes, so maybe,
And it's not an easy answer. So
yes,
don't
true.
don't worry if
Yes,
you can't
yes.
reply to this.
Yeah.
Okay, Hiba.
Major issues in my city is one of the major issues flooding. The others are habitat fragmentation, degradation of living environment, etc. So what I'm proposing is a network. Through this network, I can actually come up with a solution for the flooding problem. I have proposed the biospheres and canals to drain off the water from the city, and also vegetation throughout the edges that can actually reconnect the fragmented patches. And also I have proposed the ponds and parks along this network so as to enhance the living environment also. So I have proposed this network to address almost all the problems in the city, ma'am.
Okay. So as a final roundup, there is a question from Zubair who actually poses a question to the platform itself. So I'll take that up with the moderator as the final, also as the final concluding statements. So his question is, while I appreciate the thesis and discussions that happen on the ISOLA forum, including annual conferences, how is it that this fails when it comes to having a dialogue with the government? There has to be some serious talk on how there could be an inclusive dialogue with the authorities and constantly educate them to understand the impact of bad planning on the environment. Sunit, if you can start. And
I've just said all that. I don't think
so I
need.
think you've already answered that question in itself. Is there anything?
That is in fact the issue. That is the issue, and that is where we need to take the action now.
Okay, so we understand that. Mohan, if can any response on that?
Well, there's no response. I mean, the question itself is the answer. We know where the failings are. The question is, what do we do about it? And when I say we, it's not ISOLA versus somebody else, the profession in general. It comes back to many of the points Sunit was making earlier. So it can't be us versus them to say, I have this great idea, but the government doesn't listen. I'm the one who's electing the government. So if I can't influence it, then I should choose maybe a profession that does not involve the government.
Okay, so any concluding comments for the Thesis Open Day platform and for today, Mohan, and then we'll take it and conclude the session. Okay. Any concluding comments? Sunit, you can conclude. Any concluding comments?
I'm very positive and happy about this whole thing of taking the agenda forward and taking time out that everybody did to be able to bring their thoughts from this academic platform onto somewhere where the visibility starts. And I'm sure if we get collective in that sense, then lots of answers can be taken forward. And congratulations to all of you for such a research-oriented, brilliant, and I'd say something where each one of you have really gone into the depth of the issue. So yeah, I'm quite happy with that.
Mohan, concluding comments from you. And
No, I'm very happy that this platform is alive and thriving, and it's a really important platform to move beyond the traditional academic of valuation and juries, more to share thoughts, ideas, bounce it off each other, look at possibilities for collective thought and action. And I think it's a really very, very valuable platform, and I wish ISOLA all the very best to take this forward.
Okay. On that note, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Sunit. Thank you, Mohan. Thank you, Chandi, Hiba, Naima, and all the other participants of the Thesis Open Day for the last 2 days. I hope this event continues from any of the chapters, and I'll hand over to Maithili to wrap it up for ISOLA. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Rahul. And definitely a lot of questions regarding how the profession is moving and how maybe the answer would be that to collectively do something, but that seems too utopic. But yeah, on that concluding note, I would like to extend thanks to all the participants, first of all the 3 days. Thank you for presenting your cases here and giving a good kind of platform for discussion. And thank you, Sunit sir and Mohan sir, for spending your valuable time with us and us through these discussions. Thanks, Rahul, especially for all the 3 day of your time. And yes, the managing committee right now, thank you for all the support of Bangalore. And then a special thanks to Sachin for coordinating the entire session, all the 3 day sessions, and Rashmi for constantly helping us with the social platform and other things as well. So on this note, I would like to thank the audience as well to be a part of all the 3 days. And yeah, we look forward to more such sessions and hope this is Open Day platform continues in the years to come, and we may lead somewhere.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.